With all the massive karmic astrology that's been occurring, whether it's the grand water trine, the reappearance of kite figures, which are geometric patterns that suggest tests of faith, we once again reach an impasse on Friday the 14th where our faith is tested. We have another karmic kite that is forming in the sky, with the tip of the kite being formed with the moon in Virgo, making an opposition to Saturn in Pisces, and being supported on its wings by the sun conjunct Lilith in Scorpio and Jupiter in retrograde in his exaltation in Cancer. Whenever these harmonious kites come about, we often find ourselves delayed and pushed to our breaking point. We're often pushed to a moment of feeling like if we don't act with impetus, with drive, with willpower in this moment, it's kind of like all for nothing. And that's often what these kites show and reveal to us as the energy manifests in our life, is that we don't always have to be acting. We can sometimes sit and wait for the universe to let the other shoe drop, to let the action allow for other action to be got. And a lot of times I find with these kites, they do tend to be harmonious if you can kind of get with the grift. And the grift with this kite is going to be a opposition, a tension in your external environment between your natural desire to be studious and some sort of transformative quality that Saturn is suggesting that we need to blow the buildings down in our connection with the divine and restructure them. And this delay that's coming about in our life is part of this obstacle. It's part of the construction process of reconnecting with the divine in some way that better suits our karmic, cosmological, archetypal template, so to speak. So let's really dive into this. Let's really break this down, some of the elements of this kite and some of the conjunct aspects that are taking place, simultaneously at the same time as this kite. So as I said at the beginning of the video, the top minor grand trine, the top half of the kite, is going to be made by the moon in Virgo and then making a sextile to Jupiter in retrograde in Cancer in his exaltation. And then on the other side of that sextile, the moon in Virgo will be connecting to the sun and Lilith conjunction in Scorpio. And that's going to make up the minor grand trine aspect of this kite. Now on the bottom half, which is going to be more trines, essentially the longer trines between Saturn and Jupiter retrograde in his exaltation of Cancer, and then obviously the Sun and Lilith conjunction in Scorpio. So how does this look in our life? Well, let's look at the moon energy, because that's going to be the direction of energy where this situation manifests. So when the moon is in Virgo, we have a tendency and proclivity to want to be very studious. I always make the comparison that Virgo is essentially like Capricorn light. It's not quite as cold, detached, and work obsessed, but there is an interest and almost a compulsive tendency to want to get things done with quality over quantity. It's about getting steps 1 through 10 done, and that moment that you feel like you can't get step 7 or 8 done, it might put a little bit of a hamper on your plans. And that's what's suggested by this opposition. Saturn has been in Pisces, basically leveling out the buildings that connect us with the divine, saying that we need to really reassess our structures of connection with divinity, whatever that means for us personally. And obviously you can get an idea of what that means for you personally by looking at the Piscean area of your chart. So for me, for example, this is taking place in my 8th house of transformation. And I often find that when Saturn comes into play in that 8th house of Piscean transformation, I end up going through some sort of physical detoxification, some sort of ascension symptom, or something that feels like it's a roadblock towards my spiritual mission. And I've gotten really, really used to Saturn playing here, because he has been in Pisces now for a couple years now. And right as I get used to him being in Pisces, now he's going to move into Aries, and I'll have a whole nother set of issues. We all will. But anyways, so when the moon is making that opposition to Saturn, Pisces, in retrograde, it's essentially like some sort of Piscean transformation that is being demanded of us, regardless of where it's taking place in your chart, because that's what Saturn's doing in his retrograde motion. He's demanding some sort of transformative, some sort of catalytic quality where we take a structure that was and we reform it into something that could be, and that structure that could be is going to connect us more with our divine incarnate template. It's more like, to me, that's the fancy way of saying it's putting you more in alignment with what you're supposed to be and who you're supposed to be in this lifetime. So we might feel, like I said, an external strain between trying to get the job done studiously and qualitatively, and then this transformation that Saturn is saying, wait for the restructure. And essentially, whenever Saturn comes into play in this Piscean area of our chart in retrograde, I've really, again, come to notice that he basically says, this obstacle, this delay, this limitation that I'm putting in your way, it's to develop and cultivate something in you. And it's typically a trust in the divine. It's a trust that there is a divine direction that this delay is going in. And that is very Saturnian. Saturn wants us to learn the lesson of patience, maturity, accountability. And in the simplest way possible, sometimes Saturn just shows us that shit happens in this material reality that we really can't get around, and we kind of just got to deal with it. So let's break down some of those sextiles with the moon, because I think that those might be a little bit more noticeable, at least secondary to the opposition, which is making up the spine of this kite. So the moon is going to make that sextile to Jupiter retrograde in his exaltation of Cancer, and obviously with Jupiter being in the moon's domicile, there is a level of reception that's taking place here. Jupiter is in the superior position on this kite, and while a kite is not of the nature of Jupiter, there are all these trines independently within this kite that make up the karmic kite that are of the nature of Jupiter. So whether we're looking at the aspects nature being associated with Jupiter, or that Jupiter is in that superior position, whatever this delay and obstacle is, where we really want to get to work and make sure things are done 1 through 10, but Saturn says, hold on, hold the phone. You are not going to be allowed to do steps 3 through 5. And you're just going to have to push through. You're just going to have to still try to get the ritual, the routine that Virgoan need to make sure steps 1 through 10 done. You're just going to have to figure it out. But we can almost rest assured that whatever this situation of limitation is allowing us an opportunity to fill our cup more in the Cancerian area of our chart, because Jupiter is guardian angel orchestrating all of these events to transpire, to show us how to come back to ourselves, how to feel safe in our own body in the Cancerian area of our chart. You know, like attending to whatever needs Cancer sits in your chart. That's how Jupiter is teaching us to feel safe in our own body, safe in our own existence in this lifetime. So the moon making that sextile to the sun and Lilith conjunction in Scorpio. So the sun-Lilith conjunction in a vacuum by itself is essentially the cosmological spotlight of our life, which is the sun. The cosmological spotlight putting a direct beam on some escapist, addictive tendencies. And I don't mean to paint Lilith in a bad light. I always like to say escapist and addictive tendencies first, because these are only reactions. We use escapism, we use addictions to distract ourselves, to procrastinate, to misdirect our energy. It's our primal, raw, untamed energy, which at its core is Lilith energy. So that connection with the sun is essentially a cosmological spotlight exactly on this primal redirected energy. And in the sign of Scorpio, between the sun and Lilith, there is a need to change that misdirected primal energy into something that's beneficial, a fuel for the fire, so to speak. So we are being supported by a need to change this fuel that we can turn into a more available fuel to us, you know, that's that primal energy that we already have as a combustible in us, but we need to turn it into something that actually makes sense, something we can like fit in the furnace, so to speak. So we're being supported by this drive and this willpower and the spotlight exactly on, you know, we're not going to be confused as to what that primal energy is that we can redirect towards that Virgoan moon energy. And it's all being supported by Jupiter. And Jupiter is then making that trine to Saturn. Lilith and the sun are making that trine to Saturn. Both of those in the superior position to Saturn, because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiacal chart. So Saturn would be in the inferior position here. So Saturn is essentially supporting through those limitations and obstacles, supporting our ability to see that misdirected primal energy, and ultimately supporting Jupiter's agenda, showing us how to refill our cup. Ultimately, the takeaway with karmic kites is that we need to have faith. The kite is similar to trying to fly a kite in real life. You have two outcomes with a karmic kite in astrology. One, you don't trust, you don't have faith, you don't have patience that the limitations and obstacles are meant for you. And so what happens? The kite drags along the ground and doesn't get picked up. Alternatively, you have faith that this limitation, this obstacle, and this need to take a moment and pause and look at our misdirected primal energy and the transformation, the process of transforming that into something valuable. That pause and this limitation is obviously valuable to us. And if we have faith that even though things maybe aren't working out the way that we want them to right in this moment, they're going to work out in the long term, because this is going to show us something about an area where we might not be having enough faith, enough determination, enough ability to say, hey, bad days come up every so often. I'll get through this, I'll push through, and I'll pick up again tomorrow. Now, at the same time, Chiron in Aries in retrograde is going to be making quincunxes to both the moon in Virgo and the sun in Scorpio. So essentially, whatever this opposition is between the moon in Virgo and Saturn in Pisces is quite likely going to be the trigger of a karmic wound. Whenever we get Chiron making a quincunx, especially to elements, luminaries like the moon and the sun, which is our egoic body and our emotional resonance, that quincunx is a void point. It's an inability to integrate the information brought forward from the surface and make it applicable to our lives. Now, does that mean forever? No. Void points specifically, which a void point is a quincunx, void points specifically describe a moment in the astrological beat sheet, so to speak, the timeline where we suddenly pause and we say, new information's come about, I need to process it, I need to let it sit. And this is essentially like that sensation of having new information come into your life and needing to meditate on it, needing to like understand what to do with it and like how to take action on it. So we might be a little bit at a pause for the day, and this is why it's going to require faith, because there's not going to be an immediate ability to reckon with how to deal with the situation this kite brings up. We might kind of sort of have to just play it by ear. We might sort of have to just wing it and see how the day goes and make sure we're cognizant of how we're emotionally reacting to those limitations and obstacles. And that opposition that's formed between the moon in Virgo and Saturn in Pisces as the spine of that kite, that's an external situation. That external situation, it's going to stimulate and activate our chironic wound. And even with the sun in Scorpio shining a light on how to make changes to this karmic wound, and the sun and the moon in Virgo wanting to do the work, wanting to like put in the quality and the time to make sure that we can dig out this wound. It's essentially like the metaphor I would paint for this is having the emotional drive to make sure that we get all of the roots of the weed out. But at the same time, it's like you start digging and it's almost like you forgot how to dig. You're like not sure how to get all the roots out. You know what the objective is, but getting there is its own story. And obviously, we're going through this period in the end of 2025 as a whole with this grand water trine, where ideally this grand water trine keeps triggering this chironic wound in Aries that is, in retrograde. So it's coming up into our emotional body at the behest of another celestial body that's triggering that energy, which in my opinion is this opposition. And so we're going to feel that childhood wound and not really know how to dig it out, not really know how to make the transformation, and not really know how to work towards figuring it out. So like the biggest takeaway 13 minutes into this video is have faith, have patience, know that whatever obstacle or limitation is put into your way on Friday the 14th is meant to test your faith to see if you will trust that Jupiter is orchestrating a divine plan in your life. And the best thing that you can do is temper yourself and recognize that sometimes that primal misdirected energy that Lilith represents allows us opportunity to settle those feelings of angst, those feelings of like not being able to fix the wound, fix the limitation. It essentially gives us permission for a moment to pause in our own bodies and acknowledge that I'm only doing this coping mechanism, this addictive behavior, this escapism, because I'm responding to an external stimulus. And yeah, I'm going to work through it, but I just need to get through it now. If you enjoy these astrological and cosmological narratives, I encourage you to check out my weekly astrological workshop, Consciousness, Conjunctions, and Conversations. You can find the link tree in my bio. You can sign up. It's limited to 10 seats per week. It's completely free. We have a lot of fun. The second quick thing is if you're interested in booking a reading with me, I have menus posted on TikTok, Instagram, and the link tree in my bio once again. You can shoot me a DM on either of those. I have hardship and financial pricing available, so if you're affected by the downturn in the economy right now, do not fret. Type me a quick DM, let me know what's going on. We'll coordinate, we'll work something out. So until I see you in my DMs for a reading, until I see you signed up for my class, I will see you tomorrow for the Cosmological weekend. The Cosmological report for this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, the 15th and the 16th. Y'all have a wonderful, productive, and safe Thursday.